And so I sit in front of these three guys. One of them is like I'm like a daughter to him, and I'm in there. And it's so funny because my dad didn't know any of this stuff. I kept everything from my dad because it was all about good stuff, paradise. I never told him any of the bad stuff. And it's funny, my husband now, he's like, if your father knew that at 17 years old, you were brought in front of three guys, he would have pulled you out so fast. But I never told him.
Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Attic. Today I have the great pleasure of interviewing a fellow ex-Jehovah's Witness who has a story to tell regarding abuse. Welcome to the channel, Leanne.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Lloyd. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's very, very kind of you to share your time with me and my viewers. I know that you have an astonishing story to tell, which really speaks to how intertwined abuse is with this organization. Would you be able to kind of share with us how you first got involved with Jehovah's Witnesses?
Sure. So I got involved with my mom. She was not raised as a Jehovah's Witness. She was a Catholic. And my dad was too. My dad and my mom were high school sweethearts. They fell in love when they were 14. And then my mom became a witness from door to door. And at the time, she was in a band, my mother, my dad, and there was a saxophone player. And they were all in the band together. So even though my mom was a witness, she actually ended up being with the saxophone player. And so not only was she a witness, but she was with this other man. And so my mom and dad ended up divorced. She married this other man. And I ended up living with this other man, and she was pregnant. And now I had a brother and a previous brother from the other marriage.
From the saxophone player?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I had a brother from my mom and dad. So we were full siblings.
Right.
And my mom got married to this saxophone player, we'll call him, and had my other brother.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So you had a number of siblings.
I did. And the problem with this saxophone player was that he became a Jehovah's Witness just for my mother. And so he came to the Kingdom Hall and he seemed one way, but at home he was very physically abusive to both my brother and I.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So, yeah.
So you were dealing with the abusive element of Jehovah's Witnesses sort of right from the get-go.
Right.
Did this cause problems for you sort of in school or with learning, or did it kind of cause problems with you with your development?
Not really. I wasn't for my brother, it was, and he's deceased now, but for then he was the one who really got the brunt more of it than I did. And so it was awful to see what my brother went through. And it's interesting how religion is sort of tied into it, how I always was very, I really believed in God and I believed in Jesus. And at that time it was Jehovah, because there would be fights, that would happen between my brother and my stepfather, and it'd be physical. And, my mom would have to call the cops, and the cops would come to the house and just make sure everything was okay. And I would always run upstairs, and I'd pray to Jehovah to stop it. And I believed that Jehovah stopped it, and so it was very tumultuous, very hard. My mom herself had issues. And so it was always like volatile, a lot of violence, a lot of things happening. So living like that was very, very difficult for us.
And did the elders at all try to get involved?
I tried to talk to the elders about his abuse, and he had a bad back. And I'll never forget one elder, he said to me, well, he's got a bad back. So
yeah,
try to listen to him, try to be obedient.
That's a good reason to be abusive towards your family, because you've got a bad back. Yeah,
he has a bad back. So I'll never forget that ever. It's funny, these things that you kind of file away, but you don't really do anything about it, but you kind of they're always there in the back of your mind. That was one of them,
It's and so much of it is due to the power that elders are given, because anyone sort of watching would immediately roll their eyes at the thought of an elder suggesting that having a bad back entitles you to be abusive. But when these men are given power, and they know that their power is unquestionable, it makes them feel entitled to just make throwaway remarks like this, and feel as though they can be automatically respected. So it sounds like the elders kind of looking the other way would have perhaps made things worse for you.
For sure.
Right. Okay. And so so what happened next?
Let's see. This is I'm trying to condense this for you.
Sure.
So my mom, I said, also had like mental health issues. The abuse was so bad for my older brother, the one that we were full siblings. He went and lived with my dad, who was remarried and had a daughter who is now my half sister. So I was left with this abusive man and my mother. My dad didn't take me. He took my brother for whatever reason. I didn't go, but I really wanted to stay with my mom. And my brother at that point wanted nothing to do with being a Jehovah's Witness, where I kind of was raised as a witness, and I went to the meetings and I had friends and this and that. And so I kind of wanted to stay with my mom, and I was really loved my mom, and I was kind of willing to put up with it just to be with my mom. So he continued to be abusive to me. And then when I was 12 years old, I believe, he had an affair with someone that my mom worked with. He did the exact same thing to my mom that he did to his wife. And when he was married before and had two children. So basically, he did that to my mom. He sort of cheated on my mom and got the woman that my mom worked with pregnant, and ended up leaving my mom. So at this point, I was really happy, because I'm like, oh, Mom, finally, he's out of here. We don't have to worry about him anymore. It could just be me and you know what I mean? And at that point, my brother had problems, and he was kind of causing my dad all kinds of problems. And so he was over there causing trouble, and he had gotten into drugs and things like that. And so it was really hard. And then my younger brother was funny. We never really knew where he was, and we lived in a really, kind of bad neighborhood. And so he started mixing in with drugs and things like that. And so I was like, Mom, it's just us. We can kind of like take care of my younger brother, and it'll be better. He's gone, but my mother had a terrible nervous breakdown because he had left. And I didn't know anything really about mental illness at all. And I didn't know that my mom had mental illness when she was pregnant with me, and it was never addressed, because back then they didn't really know anything about it. And so she kind of was like in and out of the hospital with psych issues and things like that. And eventually she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which is a very difficult disorder to have. And so that's why our life was so tumultuous with her. And it wasn't until I got older that I really understood all of that. So as a child, it's very difficult to have a mom that's very unstable like that, in and out of the hospital and all these things happening, and you just don't know why. And now, of course, I understand why. And then eventually I ended up dealing with issues myself. So it's kind of like now I empathize with her more than like being angry, because I was more angry with her all the time, like, kind of mother does this stuff. So,
but it's not a very friendly organization for people who are struggling with their mental health, because it's not like you're getting advice in the publications to seek out support in that way. Yeah.
And especially back then, so it was, and even with me, when I started having issues, I was in high school, back then it was go out and service more, read your Bible more. You know what I mean? It had nothing to do with going to see a doctor ever. It was always, you weren't spiritual enough. Right. So I always felt like that. Well, I got to be more spiritual, because then it'll help me with my mental issues. And that was like the worst advice ever. So my mother finally, because she was so bad, started getting some help. But in the meantime, she was so lenient with everything, and she kind of got disfellowshipped at that point. So now my mother started smoking and started drinking. And my brother, who had lived with my dad, even though my dad wasn't a witness, he had rules. It's like, you go to high school, I want you to be on the, football team. I want you to stay on the football team. You got to be home at a certain curfew, this and that. You can't use pot in the house, this kind of that. And so he just said, well, I'm going to go live with my mom because my mom will let me do anything I want.
Right.
So now my brother lives with my mom, my younger brother's with my mom, and they're both drug addicts and they're both doing it in the house. And my mom is like letting it happen. And my mom meets another guy in a bar, brings him home, and now he's living there. And things are getting really, really not well at my house. And I'm trying to still be a witness. My mother's just fellowshipped and I've got all this chaos going on in the house. So at that point, I wanted to run away. But I still wanted to be a witness, but I wanted to run away. And I told my grandmother that I was going to run away because I was very close to my grandma at the time. I was very, very close to her. And so basically I kind of went to my dad and I said, Dad, my dad was Catholic at this point. I had a stepmom and a half sister. And I said, can I live with you? Because, I got to get out of this house. And he said, first he said, yeah, you can come. And my stepmom was very, very adamant about me not living with her. And that was because my brother had been there. He caused so much trouble. And it was basically like, I don't want another kid. I don't want another one of these kids staying here. And so once she said that, I was never going to go back there. Like I was never going to live there because I just felt unwanted, And I also asked my dad if, I would be able to go to the Kingdom Hall. And he said, no, like if you live with me, you'd have to live with me. I wish that my father would have asked me because I was only 12. Why do you want to go to the Kingdom Hall? Like, what's the reason? Do you really believe in this? But my dad's very quiet. He doesn't talk and he doesn't like confrontation. He's always been this way. I wish he would have just said to me, Leanne, why? Do you really believe in this? Because if he asked me at 12 years old why I wanted to go to the Kingdom Hall, I would have said it's because my best friend goes there and I don't want to lose her. And that was the reason. Which
is not a good reason to be in a cult, to be
not
fair.
at all.
Yeah.
I mean, and I had no idea it was a cult at that time. I mean, I believed it very sincerely and all that stuff. But believe me, I wanted to do a lot of things. I wanted to be with my friends in school. And there was, especially when I got to high school. So I just wish that he'd asked me that question. But even though I wouldn't have been able to go to the Kingdom Hall, once my stepmom kind of acted that way, I didn't want to live there. So I had an aunt and uncle who were very strict Jehovah's Witnesses, had 3 boys at the time. They were very young. And I was very close to my aunt and my grandmother. Like I said, this is my mom's sister, my mom's mother. We were all close. And my aunt and uncle offered to take me in. So I moved in with them. And my 3 cousins at the time, they took me. So I ended up living with my aunt and uncle who were, like I said, very faithful, very strong Jehovah's Witnesses.
So you moved from a very, very dysfunctional family situation where you at least had a little bit less pressure to be involved as a Jehovah's Witness to a more stable, it sounds like a more stable family situation where they were taking things way more seriously.
Exactly. And the problem is that was also dysfunctional in the fact that, my aunt and my mom and my uncle, when they were young, which is why I believe now my mother even became a witness. They had a horrible life growing up with abuse and drinking and all this kind of stuff. And so my aunt grew up in that same kind of household, which is why she became a Jehovah's Witness eventually, because my mother brought her in. My uncle was a born again Christian. They all had such a horrible life growing up. So my aunt, though, never got the help that she needed. She never got mental health help. I believe that my grandmother needed it as well, because now that I'm older, I'm actually in mental health. So I realized that everybody needed help and nobody got it. And so my aunt had also a very, very bad temper. And my uncle did as well. And so the both of them together would just not help each other. So it was very, very volatile. It was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of emotional abuse, a lot of that type. So it wasn't physical, but there was a lot of that going on. And it was very, very difficult for me, to the point where I was afraid all the time to ever say how I felt, to ever admit if I ever had a doubt, to ever say anything. I was scared to death all the time. So I just was a good girl. I did what I had to do. I kept my head down, and I was a very good Jehovah's Witness, because not only was I afraid of my aunt and uncle, I was very afraid of Jehovah. I was afraid all the time that I was going to die at Armageddon. And I always had a lot of guilt over things. And I was a good kid, but just anything, because I remember thinking, I can't be perfect like these people. Like, there's just no way. My thoughts aren't perfect, and I'm not perfect. I don't think I'm going to make it. And so I was constantly trying to do more and be better. So guilt and fear is really kind of why I did what I did. And so that's kind of, I stayed with them, and I actually got baptized at 14 from their home.
Wow. Obviously 14, way too young to be making
oh my goodness,
that sort of decision, but yeah.
Way too young, too young. And it was before high school. And once high school hit, it was like,
well, did you find that challenging going through high school as a Jehovah's
Oh my
Witness?
God. First of all, I loved everything. I loved all the people, like all my friends from high school. I loved them. Like, I don't just like people, I love them. I love people. And so I had some really great friends in high school. And then there was a boy in high school that was my best friend, but I also fell absolutely madly in love with him. And there was a really great theater program in my high school, and I loved theater. I went to the first high school play that I saw, and I remember thinking, like, I got to do this like all the time. And I couldn't be in anything. I also danced. My mother put me in dancing when I was young, and I was pretty good at it. So that was the one thing I was allowed to do. When I went to live with my aunt, she wanted to pull me out of dancing, but my mother said I wanted to continue. My mother had a little bit of rights, because my aunt and uncle never adopted me, even though they kind of wanted to. My mother and my father didn't want to give me up. So they couldn't say no to dancing. So I still was able to dance. But that was it, just be in recitals. You know what I mean? I wasn't able to be in the plays or competitions or anything that I would have absolutely loved to do. So I loved to sing. I loved to act. I loved to dance. And all this was stifled. Now I'm in love with this boy, absolutely in love. And I'm told he's not a witness, right? And I loved my friends. And so what happened is, when I knew at senior year in high school that I also couldn't go to college because I wasn't allowed, and that I was expected to work part-time in Pioneer, that was my fate. And I would never see this boy again, who I was absolutely head over heels for. I had my first suicide attempt.
Oh,
that
I'm
summer.
sorry. Yeah,
that's okay. It was bad, but it was bad. It was really, really bad. And my aunt and uncle were very spiritual, so they did not want to put me in the hospital. And my mom said, she's going in the hospital. I have issues. I feel like my daughter has issues and needs to go into the hospital. So I went into the hospital. The problem at that time was I was bipolar, but I wasn't diagnosed with bipolar, because when you're young, you don't really manifest the mania that much. And so when I was kind of happy and doing great, I would never see the doctor. You know, I was happy. It was summer, whatever. I was happy. And then I would get like suicidally depressed, and almost took my life at least 2 or 3 times, and was lucky to be saved, like lucky to be alive. It was like major. And then what would happen is I would see the doctor, and he'd say, like, okay, well, we're going to up your antidepressants. And what happens is, when you up the antidepressants, it pushes you into mania. So I'll explain the rest. I mean, obviously I got married and everything, and I didn't have a full-blown manic episode until I was 27. And when that happened, they diagnosed me with bipolar. And then I got on the right meds. And so I've been better ever since. But for all that time, I was misdiagnosed. And so it was like really, really
right.
tough
So when you say it
time.
pushes you into mania, you're talking about if you're on the wrong medication. Okay.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. So that'll show you that, you know, this will kind of push you into showing you why I got disfellowshipped later.
Sure. Okay.
I'll explain it.
Wow. Well, I feel like we need to learn.
We need 3 interviews.
Yeah.
Part 1, part 2, part 3.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to be fair, I mean, in all seriousness, it is a challenge to condense these stories into
I'm sure.
like an hour, because we're dealing with an entire lifetime,
Right,
and in many cases, including yours, a great deal of trauma. But I'm sure that even what you've shared so far will be so relatable to so many.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you ended up getting disfellowshipped.
Well, first I got reproved. That was so you know how
Right.
there's like little cracks. This is what I always said to my husband finally when I told him I wanted to leave. There's little cracks kind of like that start happening with me as being a witness, because I really believed it. I believed in Jehovah and I believed in Armageddon, but again, I told you it was more guilt and fear that led me. But then there's like little cracks, that start to develop like in the foundation, you know what I mean? And one of the things that happened was that when I was 17, I was reproved because of this boy that I was telling you about. So I was in love with him and, we were best friends and he was attracted to me. And so some things had happened between us. And I felt so guilty about it that I went to an elder and I had to sit in front of a judicial committee, which was a nightmare. Okay. And
I'm sure they didn't ask you invasive, intrusive
they
questions
did.
of a sexual.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
it was
right.
so horrible. And we didn't even really like have sex, but it didn't matter because of, how the whole, if you do certain things, it's considered pornea, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I sit in front of these three guys. One of them is like, I'm like a daughter to him and I'm in there. And, it's so funny because my dad didn't know any of this stuff. I kept everything from my dad because it was all about good stuff, paradise. I never told him any of the bad stuff. And it's funny, my husband now, he's like, if your father knew that at 17 years old, you were brought in front of three guys, he would have pulled you out so fast, but I never told him. And my aunt and uncle were more like, well, you can't listen to your father. He's Catholic. And you can't listen to your mother because she's not spiritual and she's a little cuckoo. So you listen to us, so going before the elders and getting reproved and having one of the elders say to me, he actually said this to me. He said, you're going to have to tell your husband now that you're a fornicator. Yeah. I'll never forget that one either. So there's another crack,
Well, who was your husband? I mean, so you had your kind of high school romance interfered with. So presumably you stuck with the whole thing of marrying only in the Lord.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was another kind of thing. So my husband is 14 years older than me. So what happened is he came to the Kingdom Hall. He was brought in door to door and I was only 19. And I had been a pioneer because once I graduated, I became a pioneer because, with me, I got reproved and then I'm like, oh my God, I'm so bad. Let me just, be really, really good and start pioneering and start doing all this stuff. Even though I didn't want to, I didn't like it. I was good at it. I was good at recruiting people. So, but I didn't like it. Okay. I hated it. So I started doing that and he came in and he was he progressed very, very quickly and he became a ministerial servant. So we were on the same like spiritual level. He studied with this couple that was perfect. They didn't do anything, like they were like, he was an elder, she was a pioneer. And this pioneer and I were completely two different pioneers. She was like perfect. She never did anything wrong. She was like, very self-righteous. And I was just like all over the place, and I had fun. We had fun in service, it was different. I wasn't like her at all. And, how there's different people in the congregation, there's like the fun people and the not so fun people and the self-righteous people. And I kind of hated the self-righteous people. I stayed away from them. And, so, we were just completely different. And here she is studying with this guy and he's like her, like straight-laced and perfect. And here's me, and I don't know, I thought he was such a nice guy. Like, I remember him just being nice. Like I told you, I had my first hospital stay when I was 17 and he had been in our hall and he came to visit me. And I remember thinking like, this guy is so nice. Like, I don't even know who he is. He comes to visit me in a psych hospital. Like, who is this guy? And he was handsome. And he dressed really nice and he was very, very sweet. So I remember taking notice, but it took me a long time to say hello to him because I felt like so beneath him, because he was like perfect. He was just very like, in my eyes, he was straight-laced, but very sweet. And the thing that actually got me more attracted to him was the fact that he had a daughter and because he was married before. And because of becoming a witness, they split up and he had this daughter who was like 4 or 5. And she used to come to the meetings, and I used to see myself in her eyes, because I remembered, being a little kid and having my mom be a witness and my dad not be a witness. And it was like the horrible struggle between like going to my dad's, going to my mom's, trying to please both. And I remember thinking like, this poor little girl, and so I actually started to babysit for her. And he would say things to me like, you could take her out in service all day. It's fine. And I'd look at him like, are you crazy? Like, I'm not going to take her out in service. Like, I'm going to take her to get her nails done. Like, what's wrong with you? Anyway, so I would babysit for him. And then he went into remember we had book studies back then? So he was in our book study. So like I said, I was like 19 at the time. I was still in love with this person from high school. Like, he had moved on, but I hadn't. Like, in my heart, I was still in love, very much in love. And so we started getting along and talking and really getting along. And then like he kind of acted like he had interest in me, and everybody was shocked because he was this really nice guy and he was so straight-laced and he studied with these people. Like, there'd be no way he'd be interested in me, but he kind of was, and we talked really well. We communicated well. And so we call it an arranged marriage, him and I, because my aunt actually went to him and said, look, you seem like you're interested in my niece. And we want you to know that she kind of likes you too. And if you want to start coming to the house, you can. And he actually said, well, she's young, and I'm fond of her, but she's young. And I would like her to be able to kind of like meet someone her own age and spread her wings and fly. And my aunt's like, well, she's interested in you too. So why don't you just come by the house, and he kind of like, well, yeah, all right, okay, whatever. And so he did, and we really fell in love. I mean, it was meant to be, because now it's been 26 years and he's been the most amazing person. So it's
congratulations
fine.
for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it worked out.
At least something positive so far.
Yes.
Out of this.
No.
Yeah.
And it's so it's when you hear the story, like even how he woke up, he's like, thank God for me, because he feels like if it wasn't for me, he would have never even woke up. So everything, but you know how they say like, never follow your heart, and nothing happens, like everything happens for a reason. All the good stuff. Like, I watched you one time, and because I watch all your videos, all of them, I love them. And you had said, if I had to do this over, would I change anything? You said this, and you said, no, like I wouldn't change it, because I wouldn't be who I am today. And I was, I always used to think like, oh, if I could go back, I would have done this, I would have done that, I would have done it. But the more that I've woken up and the more that I've seen, the more I've read, and I feel like I had to do that. Like I had
You'd be
to
a different person.
I wouldn't be me. Yeah. Exactly. And when you said that, I was like, it totally made me think that way. Like every relationship, good or bad, was for a reason. And I am where I am. And I met my husband. I have my 3 children because of what I went through. Right. So thank you for that. So anyway, thank you. Thank you. You don't know like how much you help, really, how much you help people. So that's how I met. And it was funny, actually. I mean, he knows all this though, by the way, like he knows everything I'm telling you. Yeah. Because I actually had said to my aunt the night before, because I was nervous about being a stepmom at like 19. And I said, I don't think I want to marry because, I feel like I'm in love with the other person and I don't really feel in love. And she's like, look, you could cancel the wedding if you want to, but he's very spiritual. He's a very good guy and he's going to take very good care of you. I'm like, okay. So then the next day I'm like, all right, I'm not going to cancel it. And then the next day I'm in my wedding gown and I'm thinking, let me talk to my dad because he's Catholic. So he's not going to talk to me like a witness. He's not going to say, oh, he's spiritual. So I said, Dad, I don't want to go down this aisle. I'm scared. I don't think I'm really in love and I'm nervous. And my dad said, Leanne, he's a good man. He's a very good man and he's going to take care of you. And I said, I trusted him, I said, okay, Dad, I trusted my family. I knew he was a good person. I just ignored my feelings and I did it.
Wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's sort of counterintuitive to how you would imagine you would deal with that situation. But
well, I was very obedient, I was and he was a good man and he was spiritual and he was a servant and he checked all the boxes,
Okay. So you find yourself in a married very young and in 21. A situation where you immediately have kind of motherly duties, as
That's
it
right.
were.
Mhm.
How did you manage to navigate through all of that?
It was really hard. Actually, my stepdaughter and I now best friends. Thank God her mom was so good to me because we were always close and her mom was never jealous. So, but the problem is she was with us all the time. So when I would go visit my dad, it would be like on a Saturday on the weekend, and I would go and then I'd go home. My husband was extremely close to his daughter and she kind of lived with us halfway. So it was like she had a room and she had clothes. And if the mom would go away for work, which she did all the time, she would be with us for weeks and weeks. And my husband was very attentive to his daughter. And they were very, very close. And at that point, I was young and I needed a lot of attention and I didn't get it. So it was really, really hard, even though I was good at being motherly and I really cared about her. All those feelings that were inside of me, I kind of just suppressed, and did what I had to do. I was good at being a mother because when I moved in with my aunt, my cousins were only 6, 3, and the other one had just been born. So I took care of them, so I was good at being motherly. And so I did what I had to do and I never took it out on her. We were close, very, very close, but it made me take it out on him. It was more like, like, this is like ridiculous. I'm not getting any attention here, and I was just giving and not feeling like I was getting anything in return. It was very hard for a long time. And I didn't really feel like he was the one. And so like for years and years, it was just, I was in an unhappy marriage and, it was really rough, really, really rough. And he kind of didn't know any different. He was kind of like, oh, this is great. He's kind of like lives in the clouds kind of thing. Like, oh, everything's fine. And I never talked to him. I never told him how I felt. I was like the best actress. I never told anybody how I felt. So I lied to everybody I knew. So it really wasn't his fault. We've been married for 26 years and we just know each other now in the last year, both of us.
Wow. Okay.
Because you know how you're not supposed to, if you have doubts about anything, you don't tell your spouse because you don't want to stumble your spouse. So when he had doubts, he never shared it with me. When I had doubts about the religion, I never shared it with him.
Okay.
Because that's what we're taught, right? Don't be critical of it.
Yeah, and isn't that a messed up situation? Because
Totally.
if there's anyone you should be able to share things with, especially doubts about your religion, it should be your life partner. So
of course, so backwards, but that's what we were taught, and that's what we did, and we both, my husband is very, very obedient as well. He's kind of a militant guy. Does everything the right way. So we were both very much just kind of like going through the motions and doing everything we were supposed to do and doing everything right.
As I understand it, the whole issue of abuse would kind of raise itself again in your new relationship. So
yes.
Are you able to talk about that at all? Only if you feel comfortable.
Yes, I can. It's actually involves my husband. Just to backtrack what happened with me, because I was the one who woke up first. The abuse situation is what helped my husband to wake up. So I just want to backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
When I told you about how I had bipolar and I was manic, that manic episode, when you're manic, it makes you do things completely off color. I mean, I don't want to make this a lesson about bipolar, but I did a lot of things that I would have never done. And I was a witness at that time. And so, when you're under stress at that point, Mike had sent me to college because I really wanted to go to college. And I was working in an oncologist's office and I was a regular pioneer and I wasn't eating and I wasn't sleeping. And that led to this manic episode. And I had a indiscretion with someone, a professor, and I didn't even have any interest in this person. It's just what mania does. And so I had to get disfellowshipped. But my husband looked at me and he said, "This isn't you. Like, this person is not my wife." He goes, "You love me, you love your family. You know what I mean? I don't know who you are, but it's not you. And I think you need to go to a new doctor." And at that point, I was able to find, believe it or not, a Jehovah's Witness who was a counselor who said that she would see me even though I was disfellowshipped. She said, "I would like to see you anyway." she saved my life. She saw me, she diagnosed me with bipolar. Then I saw another doctor who also said I had bipolar. And then I was put on the right medication at 27. Thank the Lord. It's never been bad again. I mean, I'm up and down, but I am like, I've been able to have kids, everything. So saved my life.
Wow.
But anyway, that disfellowshipping was the worst thing that ever happened in my life. You know, I had an aunt and uncle who raised me, 3 cousins who were my brothers, and they didn't look at me while I was disfellowshipped. You know, friends, you know how it is. Friends that are family, brothers, sisters, you know, that scripture, you'll leave your mother, your father, and you'll have sisters and brothers in 100-fold. That's my life. You know, I didn't have anything else. I had them, and they didn't talk to me, shunned me the whole time. And so I came back. I did it. I did all the right stuff. I came back and I got stronger than ever. But again, it was cracks, you know, those cracks in the foundation. And then I started thinking, like, I don't know if Armageddon's really going to come in my lifetime. Like, they've been saying it for so long, and I've been believing it since I was young. And I really thought I wouldn't even go to college. Like, I thought I don't even have to tell my dad I'm not going to college. So I was afraid to tell my dad I wasn't going to college. And I remember sitting at an assembly and thinking, like, I'm not going to have to tell him because, you know, Armageddon's going to be here. And those were the times when the anointed guys, we didn't know who they were. They weren't on the broadcast. You know, they were the old men that would come out with the canes. You know, you didn't know.
They were a bit more discreet then.
Very discreet. We didn't know who they were, you know, and I'd be like, oh, here comes the 100-year-old guy. And, you know, and I think, wow, I don't even have to tell my dad I'm not going to college. So now I'm thinking, like, you know, I don't want to just be me and my husband and like no kids. And then I get old and I don't have anybody. And so at that point, I was like, maybe I should start having some kids. So I did. So anyway, we did. And then we kind of were raising them. The pandemic is really what got me to wake up. It was the pandemic. So again, I had these doubts kind of like here and there, I would say, like to my aunt or my husband, I would say, you know, do you ever think this isn't real? Like, do you ever think our religion isn't real? Because it's like 8 guys. They're just 8 guys. And they say they like run the whole world and God speaks to them. And I'm like, what if it's not true? You know? And I would say, and my husband always had something clever to say, you know, to pacify me. And he'd take out the Bible, you know, and my aunt would be like, well, even if it's not true, it's the best way to live. And she truly believed that. God bless her. She believes it. And I was like, all right. And, you know, her kids all grew up and became like servants and elders and got married and like not having kids, waiting for the new system, like did really wonderful. So I'm thinking maybe my kids will kind of feel that way too. And they won't be as deprived as I felt, you know, because some kids like it. So I kind of felt like that. And then the pandemic hits and I'm so close to all my friends and all my family and like nobody's doing anything. Right? Like my family's not seeing them, we're not seeing anybody. That's okay for a little while. But then like a year goes by and people are starting to go back to do things. And my friends still aren't coming over. They don't want to wear masks. They don't want to come over. And I'm thinking like, this is ridiculous. And this is so insular, you know? And at the same time, they started having all these videos and I'd watch the videos and they would depict paradise. And I think, I don't really want to live in this paradise. Like, it doesn't seem where I want to be, you know, like it doesn't seem, they all kind of started looking like Stepford people, you know, like Stepford
the smoothies
wives.
Weren't appealing enough for you. And the fruit tables.
And then I remember seeing this one video where this woman like got in a fight with her husband at work and she was like telling her workmates about it and she was bringing the Bible to the table. And I remember texting my aunt. That was probably one of the last videos that I really watched. And I said, if I got to act like this woman in the video, enjoy me now because I'm dying at Armageddon. And I was joking with her, but I really did mean it. And so at that point, I'm like, I got to get out of here. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to become what my niece is. My niece, there's a local hospital, and she became a patient care technician. And it was like a 4-month course and you become a patient care technician. You can work in the hospital. Now I love people. I took some medical courses. My kids were older and I thought, you know what, I'll get out of the house. And it was conducive to my schedule with my children. And it was COVID. So everybody was home. My husband was home and I can do this 4-month program. And I'm thinking like, I'll be in a hospital. So I'll never, COVID's never going to win. I'm never going to have to be stuck in this house again because I'll work in a hospital. And so I did that. Another best thing I ever did. You meet people. I was in the course. I had a wonderful teacher, just everything. People start saying things to you. You start listening. I had a physical therapist that I've had for like 12 years. I'll never forget something he said. And I told him, you don't even realize how instrumental you were in me leaving. But all he said was, so you have the truth. He goes, go out there and see what else is out there and explore it. And then say, well, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true because I have the truth. And then go back. Like, what are they afraid of? Just simple things that people were saying that I would listen to all the time. I was always listening, So that comments like that and things like that. And then all the doubts just started everything resurfaced, all those cracks, everything just started resurfacing. And I got to tell you, I never heard of you. I never heard of Steve Hassan. I never watched an apostate video. I was a good girl. The only thing I ever would have possibly come across was there's this woman that was in our congregation who left, and I loved her. She was so sweet. And she left her husband and the kids and everything and just stopped and started celebrating Christmas. And she was talked about. It's like, oh my God, she left, but she's celebrating Christmas. She's so bad. And she's doing this and doing that. I remember thinking like, wow, what happened? Like, why did she just leave like that? And I guess she sent out an email to all of us. And my aunt said, if you get an email from so-and-so, you better delete it. And I'm like, okay. And that's what I would do. Like, I would just listen to her and delete it. I didn't realize that she had seen the thing about the Australian Commission and wanted to protect me because I had kids. So finally, I'm thinking about it, and I'm really miserable now. Like, I really don't want to do the meetings. I really don't want to go in service. And my husband's really noticing, like, she just doesn't want to do this anymore, and then he would notice and I'd be like, okay, let me pick up so he doesn't think that I'm falling away. I was easy going with my kids. It was like if they ate a cupcake at school, I'd be like, well, they're young. They'll make their own decision. I was nothing like my aunt and uncle. I was totally the opposite way. And she kept saying, what are you doing? Like, you're not raising them right. They're going to die. Like, they're not going to be witnesses. They're not going to get baptized. What are you doing? Like, what's wrong with you? How did I raise you? And I just remember thinking, I don't want to be like you. But anyway, so I was more lenient with them. And then I got more and more lenient as time went on. And then I just saw that video and I'm like, I don't think. Which video?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. The one about the witness who got in the fight with her husband at work and.
Oh, right. Okay.
Just had the Bible at work and the workmates were telling her like, oh, you should like leave your husband or you should do this. And then she realized like, oh my God, I can't talk to these people about my husband. It's like, it was just some crazy video. And I'm like, forget it. That's when I told my aunt, if I have to be like this lady, I'm going to die. And so at that point, the videos were just getting like, I was, what it was? I started thinking to myself, why are they on TV now? Like, this is weird. Why are we seeing videos, this Caleb and Sophia thing? Like, it just started getting to me, all of that. Like, it's so, we're so insular. What do they not want us to watch TV anymore? Like, is this just going to be like Jehovah's Witness TV? Like, we're not going to let her, there was so much about the world that I really liked. And I remember thinking, I must love the world too much, but this paradise has nothing that I want to do. I don't want to be here. And just all these thoughts and all that. And so finally I decided, I'm like, I don't think I want to go back to the meetings. But you know what I did before? I'm going to tell you what I did. There was nothing apostate. I prayed to Jehovah. I said, Jehovah, I just want you to know that I love you and I love Jesus and I always have. I just don't believe in the Jehovah's Witness organization anymore. I'm like, and so if it is the truth and it's your organization, I'm sorry. And you're probably going to kill me at Armageddon. And that's okay. I said, but I can't live this way anymore. I'm so miserable. And after that prayer, I told my husband, this is it. Like, I'm not going to go back. And here I have three kids. And he looked at me like, I crushed him. Probably like, it was as bad as me saying, hey, I'm leaving you for another guy. So I woke up. He didn't wake up right away. So that was really tough. Now, the apostate stuff started, which was the best thing that ever happened to me, by the way, you guys. That started because I had friends that had left and never came back. And I kind of never really lost contact with those people. Like I had a very best friend, the one that I didn't want to leave the Kingdom Hall for when I was 12. She had left a long time ago and we didn't really see each other, but I kind of kept in contact with her a little bit, like her husband had died and I went to the funeral, stuff like that. And my aunt would always get mad, like, why don't you cut these people out? You got to cut these people out. Like, what's wrong with you? You know, why are you still friends with them? I couldn't, I just felt like that was so mean. You know, I wasn't good with the disfellowshipping thing. And so I had talked to someone who had left and mentioned, you know, a website. I'm like, are you talking about what? Are you talking about like an apostate website? I would never go on those. And she's like, just look up this one. And I think she told me about JW Facts. And so I looked on JW Facts. I was like reading it like, oh my God, wow, wow, wow. And then you. And so I look at you and you brought up Steve Hassan's mind control book, you know, the cult and mind control. That's the only book it took. As soon as I read that book, I knew for sure I was out. This is a cult, like it was a cult. And I never thought of it as being a cult because there were thousands of people, like, you know, so many people. And I thought cults were small. And, you know, you think of one guy, Jim Jones, you know, whoever that guy was with it him with the Kool-Aid? You know, you think of one person being the Messiah. This is 8 people. But my God, I was convinced. And then after that, it was just all your videos all the time. That's why I say you were just so wonderful. And I watch everything you put out. And then you actually had some women on. I read like The Last Days book, and there was another book by another girl. She had wrote Oh Sister, I think it was, and she wrote another book. I started reading books like crazy. Like I stopped watching TV, they'd be happy. And I started reading all these books and your books, you know what I mean? Like there was so much information and amazing stuff. And so I got really educated, real educated. I also became a patient care technician and ended up working in the psych unit in the hospital, which just was meant to be again, because you don't work in a psych hospital unless you have a master's degree. I do not have that. But the woman who worked there, who is now not there, she was only there for 6 months, really liked me, gave me a chance. I sold myself down there and I got a job. And so it's been the best job that I've ever had. And so I know a lot about like psych issues and stuff like this. And you know what I mean? And so all of those books and everything is just all right in my wheelhouse. And so I'm like, I would love to be able to like help people someday the way you do, you know, therapy wise, to kind of get out of this, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's a really, really important area. It's mental health,
yes.
as you just spelled out in your story. Yeah. So
yeah.
Good for you.
But the abuse, I just wanted to tell you, I woke up and then, so my husband wasn't waking up at all. And at all, he didn't want to hear anything I had to say. He didn't want to know anything about, you know, the apostates and nothing like that. And then when I told him about the sexual abuse, then he got a little nervous. And I said, you know, we got little kids. My oldest one is 17, but my twins are 9. And I'm like, I think you need to watch Leah Remini's Scientology one on Jehovah's Witnesses. And I think you need to watch it. And he said, okay. And he watched it. That was the only thing he did. And then I said to him, at first, before I started looking at all that stuff, I was thinking like, you know, it's okay. Mike can take them to the hall, you know, and I'll just do what I want with them and it won't be so bad. But then when I started seeing that it was like this destructive cult, I'm like, no, now I don't want my kids going to the hall and I don't want my kids out in service. And that was like the first thing I said to Mike, I don't want you taking them out in service. And he said, okay, you know, because at that point we were just doing it on Zoom. But then like, I was like, I don't want them going at all. Because I started to see how destructive it was. So what happened is his daughter, because I woke up and left, it gave her the impetus to tell me that she was molested at 11 years old by someone in the congregation that we were very, very close to. And it happened on our watch. She had never.
It happened while you were married to.
Absolutely. And it happened when she was with someone that we knew at a gathering. And she had never, ever told us because she thought we would believe the organization or protect it, one or the other. So when she told me, I started vomiting. I was so upset. And I said, you got to call your father right away. Because the problem is she always talks to me and never her father. Unfortunately, my husband has the reputation of we weren't really able to talk to him, me, my kids, and her, because he was just seemed so perfect all the time. It's like we didn't want to disappoint him. So the kids always came to me, and it was the same thing with his daughter. She came to me, even though I was just the stepmom. She didn't ever talk to him. She talked to me. I said, you got to talk to your father. So once he found out about that, he goes right to the elders. And he says, look, I want files. I want this. I want that. Did you go to the police? Did you do this? Did you do that? Oh, and these are people that are supposed to know us really well. We're best friends with these people. And right. And my uncle is an elder in the congregation, knows this person. And so we're thinking we're going to get all this help. And when he asked, they're like, we don't have the files. He's like, what do you mean you don't have the files? We don't have anything. We don't have anything. I said, and what we do remember is when she was about 17, something had come up that the elders had talked to us about. Okay. And it was something about her, that she had done something to this person. And it was sort of like mutual. And it wasn't anything very illegal or anything like that. Anyway, some kind of encounter that they knew about. But then years later, this kid that I'm talking about, this guy, he actually got disfellowshipped and confessed to what happened, but never said that she was only 11 years old. So we were never talked to about it. So they knew, they had records of what happened. Never. I
was going to say, because to go to the elders and say we demand files implies that your husband was aware of something having happened in the past, that he was putting together the pieces.
And the thing is, we knew that they had talked to him recently because my stepdaughter had gotten a text from this person. Okay, he got back in touch with her, and this is 10 years later, and says, I'm getting disfellowshipped. And he says, please don't tell them I raped you.
He said that in a text message.
In a text message that she did not save, of course. So she's like beside herself, and she got this message and she never told, and all this stuff. And so sure enough, when we talked to them, they did tell us what happened. They did tell us that he admitted to it, and they never went to the police. And they don't have any files. That's what they basically said. They said, we told her mom that she could go to the cops. That's what they said. We told her mom she can go to the cops. Now, this is after my husband's digging into this, right? So my husband went to her mom and said, did the elders talk to you? Did they ever tell you that you should go to the cops? She said, no, they never talked to me. And then my husband talked to his daughter and said, did they ever come and talk to you? Did they ever come and talk to you about it? And she said, no, I don't remember anybody talking to me ever about that situation. So then he goes back and he says, I want to go to Bethel. Where would the files be? And they said they'd be at Bethel. He goes, okay, I want to go to Bethel. And the presiding overseer said to him, they're not going to give them to you, Mike. They're not going to give you anything. They're just not. And he was just like, what do you mean? What do you mean they're not going to give me anything? They have them, but they're not going to give them to you. And so he couldn't believe it. He was just beside himself. And these are people that he loved. These are people that he trusted. This was my uncle, who was like a dad to him. So that was it for him. That was really it for him. And I think another thing that happened too is that we had gone away on vacation. I had woken up pretty much, and he was still on the fence. And we had a great time on vacation. He was like I call him like on vacation, because he's so cool now that he's woken up. He's just a totally different guy. And on vacation, we had a really good time, and he kind of had grown a little beard and he was fine. And then we come home, it's a Tuesday night, and he gets all the kids ready and he gets dressed and goes to the meeting. And at that night, I'm like, this is it. This is the end. He's going to come home. I'm going to tell him, like, we're done, because I don't want my kids going there anymore. Like, I just don't. They love, how they call it love bombing. They love bombed him so much at the meeting, saying, oh, good for you. Didn't ask about me. Now, I was like very strong in the congregation. I did stuff for years and years. I cooked for people. I pioneered for years and years. I was very active in the congregation. Not one person asked for me, and they're like, keep it up, Mike, keep doing what you're doing. And he said, this is ridiculous. Not one of you asked for Leanne. Like, nobody asks how she is or what she's doing, and just keep coming. Like, nobody cares that my marriage is going to fall apart. Like, doesn't Jesus want us to love our spouses? Doesn't Jehovah want us to love our spouses? Doesn't he hate a divorcing? And you're here encouraging me to do this to my family, to make another family implode like I did the first time when I became one. And it just hit him. It just hit him at that point. And so that was it. And that was the beginning of his waking up. And then he kind of started looking at all your stuff too.
Wow.
So now we call it personal study, all our apostate information.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I'm still rocked by what you've said about your stepdaughter. I mean, I guess my two most pressing questions would be, has she been able to get the support that she needs? And also, was her abuser brought to justice? No,
never. And this is the thing. We wanted her to bring him to justice. He says, it's not too late. The statutes of limitations aren't up. You can bring him to court. You could do this stuff. But because she had suffered with a lot of growing up, she suffered with a lot of mental health issues, a lot of, she had drinking issues and all these problems, which we believe were stemmed from this abuse, which we didn't know. She feels like they would use all that against her in court. And she said, I feel like I'd be raped all over again. She said, so I don't want to go through this. I don't want to do it. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to ignore it, which is her choice.
Yeah.
However, we were able to, the Pennsylvania, they're going after all those pedophiles in Pennsylvania.
The grand jury, yeah.
Yeah, we were able to call and report our case.
Oh, fantastic.
Them. Yeah. So, we do what we can do on our end, but we can't force her to do anything that she doesn't want to do, because she's grown up and has a child at this point, and she just doesn't want to relive that. Although mental health, she's gotten a lot of help with that. Good. And she's doing extremely well with that.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Very well.
Well,
she's a great mom,
Well, I'm glad that you were able to bring it to the attention of the Pennsylvania grand jury, and who knows, maybe something can come of that, and hopefully, your stepdaughter can manage things in the way that's right for her. Mm-hmm. But how horrendous it is that your elders were so uncooperative to the point of just telling, it sounds like just lying to your face.
Yeah, just basically not helping and saying there were records, but they weren't getting them, basically. And don't bother going to Bethel, because they're not going to help you there either. And it's funny, because right away, once I heard that this was a cult, I immediately started doing everything. Holidays, and I'm like, this is all a bunch of bull. So I'm going to do everything I've wanted to do my whole life, like Christmas and da-da-da-da-da. And so now we're not technically disfellowshipped, but nobody talks to us. We're shunned and all that stuff. And so because of all that, but they're not really trying to come after us. And my husband thinks it's because of this issue, because if they press us, all he's been saying to them is, whenever they call him or ask him, I want my daughter's records, and then I'll talk to you. Are you my friend? Then give me my daughter's records. So they know that whenever they talk to him, that's what he's going to say. Give me my daughter's. If you care about me at all, don't talk to me about Halloween. Give me my daughter's records.
Mm.
And so he feels like they're not coming after us because of that reason.
Yeah. And that's, I've picked up on that before, where they kind of stand off a little bit when child sexual abuse in particular is an issue, and they know that they could kind of stir a hornet's nest by laying down the law with the disfellowshipping and disassociation and all that kind of thing.
Right.
So
that's our only, because at this point I said to him, I thought that if I wasn't disfellowshipped, my aunt and uncle would talk to me, or my cousins, but not at all. They don't at all. I've lost them. And my aunt and uncle were like my parents.
Yeah.
And they don't speak to me. And my cousins were my brothers, and I haven't talked to them since the summer.
And has that been difficult for you?
Oh God, they were my everything, you know, but very, very, very hard. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but at least your children, and your stepdaughter have a chance at a new life because of in many respects, because of the brave decisions that you and your husband have made. So
yeah,
you're really to be applauded for that.
Thank you so much.
If anyone were watching who might be in two minds as to whether to continue on in the organization despite perhaps doubts or misgivings, what would your advice be to them?
Apostates are wonderful people, and they love Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's why they do what they do, because of love for Jehovah's Witnesses. That's why. Because basically, when you want to leave, you're scared to death. You know that you're not going to have your family and friends that are witnesses. So you're going to be all alone. You're probably afraid that you're going to die at Armageddon. You might be facing a divorce from a spouse that's a witness. You might be losing your children. It's the scariest feeling in the world. And that's kind of how I felt, like I had nowhere to go. Of course, I had a lot of family that weren't witnesses too, but my immediate family and all, the family that raised me and all my you know what I mean? I was going to lose everything. All my best friends were witnesses that I had for over 30 years. It's like, where do you go? And once I went to those websites, I felt like this big weight was lifted off my shoulders. And it's like, wait a minute, you were lied to, number one. It's not true. So get that off, get the guilt and the fear off of your shoulders. And now you can actually rebuild your life. And so it's basically apostates. We don't call you guys, we refuse to say that. We call you activists. Like, we're very upset with that word. But anyway, they're wonderful people who love Jehovah's Witnesses and say, hey, we know where you are. We know you're scared. We want to help you. It's the best thing that I ever did. And if I could be on the video and I can help anybody, I would love to. And basically our house is the same way. Like, if anybody wakes up that are former friends, we have one, anybody that sometimes we do have people, or, if my son has any friends that are kind of on the fence, don't know what to do. It's like, our home is, they're welcome here. And we just are there for them, same way.
You're a safe house locally.
Yeah.
For
we're
people exiting.
We're a safe house. Exactly.
Wonderful. Yep. Leanne, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing your story, which I'm sure will be very, very inspiring and relatable to many of my viewers. So thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome, Lloyd. So nice to talk to you.
Viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I certainly have. Don't forget that you can watch similar interviews and videos by subscribing to the Lloyd Evans channel, but that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for watching.